Okay, welcome. Do it here. Day 2 of the International Battery Show. Unfortunately, bandwidth was not good enough for me to have HD live streaming, so I'm just going to record and upload later. Here you see is the conference that has it's quite expensive, but the different tracks and lectures from the international experts, workshops. So a lot of this will be unfamiliar to people outside of the battery business. Someone I'm going to show people will be useful to anybody, even without a background in science, but a lot of the things that are interesting to people within the business are very technical and related to very specific trends in the industry, such as materials or manufacturing methods or various things. So I got my badge from yesterday and should be able to get right past security, no problem. Get onto the floor. I went around yesterday and I collected a ton of reading materials. People saw my chess stream last night. I think so.
It was already in, right?
Well, yesterday.
Oh, yesterday. New day. Just remind me.
Okay, so I got past security. See fellow yarmulke wearer. Okay, so it was interesting. You see a lot of these Chinese companies, and a lot of these Chinese companies have really only started in the last 10, 15 years. I was mentioning I've been going to these conferences for about 10 years. And when I first started going, the number of German companies was significantly higher. It was maybe like 30-40% German companies, and now it's maybe like 15-20% German companies and 15% Chinese companies. Interesting that most of these Chinese companies are really just opened in the last 10-15 years, and the battery technology is a new technology, and you see all types of batteries like a lot of these companies, I forgot to check up the exact percentage that automotive makes up of total manufacture. But I mean, see, the batteries obviously are a known thing. You have batteries, your regular batteries for devices, battery packs, changeable rechargeable batteries, backup batteries for construction devices, like your screwdrivers, drills, and various things. You have your old school, what would have been lead acid batteries. Now you have lithium batteries and the various types. So a lot of these companies make all types of batteries, but at this show, it's largely focusing on automotive batteries and the latest technologies. Although you can find things like laptop batteries and cell phone batteries, and so to have a battery that lasts a little bit longer is one of the key things of modern technology, of the area of research. Is there's environmental concerns, there's material concerns, and various things, but one of the key concerns is the battery life, how long it lasts, how quickly it recharges, especially for vehicles, because the most price is also a very important thing, but the concerning transformation towards an electric grid, the price point of the batteries is extremely important, and added onto that is the battery life, the recharge speed, how many miles can you drive, how quickly can you recharge the battery. So here you'll see the latest in technology. You see the whole floor here is taken, the whole room. The conference center is packed with breakout sessions and workshops and lectures, and at the same time the newly expanded Suburban Collection showplace, thanks to Mr. Fisher, is basically taking up the whole floor. So anything related to batteries. This show is only 4 years old, and it's the same company that makes the automotive testing Expo, which is also interesting. I've been going to that a few years. I think the battery show is one of my favorite. And you can see you have equipment that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars on display, some even millions of dollars of equipment. Companies from all over the world displaying their devices, everything that's useful in terms of batteries, from the actual batteries themselves to the materials, research, computer software, manufacturing machines, engineering firms, construction firms that build design plants, and so on and so on. So I'm going to walk all the way to the end. This is where I started last time, a little food section here. This is where I started yesterday after I did my brief stream, and God forbid yesterday that fire alarm. But I started on this far end and worked my way to the other end. So you got an old electric car of Detroit from 100 years ago on display, because people know the history that electric cars are not a new idea. I did my stream about that on my channel about electric cars, but those have some of the first cars were actually electric, but gas has more energy density. For those scientifically minded, the energy density of gasoline fuel is extremely high, where the amount of energy that could be produced from a gallon of gas is very high. So here you have Fihong, which I showed yesterday, displaying some of these charging stations. So this would be your most recent plug-in technology, your various plug-ins. You could see some of these you might even be able to see on the roads. So I'm going to show this. You see the latest. Here's Weiss, an equipment maker for cells. You see their example of the battery manufacturing process in the different steps that it takes from to make a battery, various equipment, devices, machines that would be useful for making batteries. Probably these cost hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. But had you wanted to design a factory that makes batteries, this would be one of your linear assembly. And it's probably also related to the rise in China. Like after World War II, when Japan rises as a manufacturing center, God forbid, largely related to the destruction of their infrastructure, so they had to build everything from anew. So in China, in the last 15 years, that they've been able to build these assembly plants largely anew, as opposed to the U.S. The infrastructure is very old, and certain processes like computer-assisted design, interchangeable parts. So, here's just all these various types of charging station. I almost work for someone in Detroit who installed these devices, but there's not quite enough economic demand. I mean, you see them here and there. There's not quite enough economic demand for mass amounts of these charging stations, although you do see them quite frequently. But your average parking lot will not have them. You'll be expensive, large downtown facilities, educational facilities, or whatever. But it's not at the point where you're going to see them all over the place. So here's the German section. As I said, when I first started going to these shows, you would see the Germanic companies would have been completely dominating, and now there's probably just as many Chinese companies as German, although a lot of the German companies are partners with the Chinese companies. So just a KUKA robot on display, moving batteries. So if you had large sums of money, the reason why things are made in China is not necessarily completely due to cheap labor. So I came here yesterday. This is where I got my German-U.S. pin, and I didn't have a chance to read their forecast about business in Germany, but I look forward to reading that. I appreciate their books. David is a friend of Germany in many ways. My ancestors came from Germany, some of them. to America, although I'm a Jew. Universal Robotics, good company. I think they made like the Baxter robot. You could train these robots just by moving with your hand, and then they could repeat it. So you have companies that aren't directly related to the battery business that are here displaying devices like robotics, generic manufacture that are here because of generic manufacturing, automation, production that's useful to anybody. So here's Grab, advanced technology, magnets, electricity production, various related fields, more robotics. Schunk, a famous German company like you are related to companies. Here's automated solutions. So these are not specific to batteries, but more generic manufacture. You see, examples of clamps, interchangeable robot arms. So you have the robotic arm, and you have the degrees of freedom, how they turn, like I've shown on previous conferences. And then the head has interchangeable parts that you could put, suction clamps, various devices on. So that's not the focus of this conference, but those companies are here demonstrating their robotics equipment, and a lot of these factories are completely roboticized. Here's Pre-Tech Automated Factory Solutions, another Asian company. And saying from the Asian company, you have you're not only small-time battery makers that might be based on cheap labor, but you also have complete the latest in best technology, possibly better than German or Japanese, but second to only the top German or Japanese companies that actually make the full equipment production line so that you could set up a battery manufacturing plant. Eaton is right near my house. Eaton is a automotive supplier. They actually have a research facility right near my right near my house. All types of automotive components, a lot of it related to the battery industry. So, some of these huge companies will have tables here, because batteries are related to everything. You have magnets, a connection between, I got one yesterday. Excellent, thank you. Magnets connected to battery, the devices for energy generation, or some magnets are used. Zeiss scanning devices, and they come to a lot of these shows also. You see the scanning is very relevant to any form of manufacture. Novastar Solutions also coming to here. 3D printers, you can see some of the most recent advances in 3D printer. I saw the new metal filament printers have really been advancing. More generic like milling, molding type solutions that are relevant to all types of manufacture. So here I'm in the general production form. I'm going to get to the more automotive. I just started from this corner, and Dow Chemical, Dow Corning, materials more that materials are extremely important. Protean, automotive technology. As I said, if you're looking to advance your company, the main thing you want to get into is the automotive business, because automotive makes up the biggest sector of manufacture. And if you could get your product related to automotive manufacture, that's where your largest amounts of sales are going to come from. So you have some companies, as I said yesterday, that just might make one part and sell that part, and you could be a multi-millionaire, even possibly a billionaire, just from having a part or two that has huge amounts of sales. But usually these companies will go into selling all types of devices as they grow, hundreds of thousands. Some companies even have millions of various things that they sell. And plus there's a lot of specifications, because it's hard to make a generic part that would be useful to all different type things, because different models, different companies have different specifications. Could be different power demands, different size, various specifications that would require different devices. So here you have a prismatic cell, but you see various sizes, various ampages that would be necessary for different devices. So within given technology, like just like a battery, you could have thousands and thousands of various batteries that just have slightly different specifications. You also have periodicals. So I didn't get this yesterday. I'm going to grab this now because I'm not going to come back. So here's a magazine called Electrical Apparatus. So I'm going to grab these. It looks interesting. Here's the most recent ones. So I'm going to grab a few of these most recent ones, check it out. And, so just an interesting new publication related to technology. So there's all types of companies. Hey, God bless. Excellent. Very good. The local company, I was here yesterday. They distribute 3D printers, even metal filament printers. I have on Facebook, I even visited their site right near my house here. Here's another periodical, Converting Quarterly, I showed yesterday. And, so you have periodicals that will publish the latest designs. And, they had advertisements in them that usually pays for them. So a lot of times they sell them. Some of them they give for free, like Charged Magazine. I get to my house like 10 different magazines that are given away for free, either to just increase publicize the business, and they're funded by selling advertisements in them. So the metal filament printers have made quite a bit of advancement. Prices just came down in the 3D metal filament printers. Here's scanning technology. So you just have a generic robotic arm here. So as I said, they're programmable and they have interchangeable parts. So you could attach a scanning head to the head of a robotic arm. Here's Phoenix Contact. You can see all various different type charging devices they make. As I was mentioning, in Europe has a different standard. So here you have like a whole conglomerate of Euro group, various technologies related to manufacture. So it's pretty interesting. Like, I'm having fun just walking through, talking through it, trying to refresh my memory of what I read yesterday, or years haven't been coming to this conference. So also you have a lot of computer programming, computer simulation technology. So you either have, as I said, the reason why the Chinese have been able to really move in and dominate the battery business is the changes, maybe they call it Internet of Things, or the third or fourth industrial revolution, where factories are really built in a much better way than they had been in the past. And one of the large reasons of that is because of computer-assisted research, where you have simulations ran by a computer, interchangeable parts, and computer-controlled systems. So if you think of like a production line in the olden days, where you had one machine and then you needed a human to take the product of that machine and put it in the next machine, and then you had programmable physics. So you think of just like momentum and basic Newtonian physics, where you have one line that's doing something at one speed and it feeds into the next machine. And that could be calculated out even before computers, where you just set the speed of one computer and try to feed it into the next part, as opposed to now where they're configurable. They could be sped up or slowed down, all controlled by computers in a way that was unthinkable even decades ago. And as I said, the original Henry Ford production line, where they just made one type device, and it was cheap because it made the same one and a whole bunch of them, where now the production lines are reconfigurable, where sometimes the machine itself could change it. I toured the Ford Focus final assembly plant, but we have multiple divisions on the same line, where if you want variations of parts, the computer itself could do different things with the forms of artificial intelligence, or even if it's not artificial intelligence, where it's just pre-programmed into the computer to allow it to do different things based on specification, the desires of the customer. So you don't have to set up one production line that just makes one small widget. You could have the same production line that could be reconfigured even automatically from the computer that make hundreds of various components. And so that has changed manufacture. Siemens, that's here. I've been going to the Siemens conference for years. I even videoed a Ramble there. Has what they call the fourth industrial revolution, the third industrial revolution, and it was IoT, automation, and Internet of Things, and the fourth industrial revolution they're calling digitalization. So the computer, what they call like PLCs and SCADA for production facilities, the computer could have full knowledge of what's happening at any point in control. So if you walk around, I'm not sure if you'll see these PLC devices, but these electrical controllers that control production line equipment, and these electrical devices that control production equipment, it's kind of like a fuse box, but they're much more in depth. And here they have a lot of companies that sell sensors also. So some of these companies say they make millions of parts, are like sensors. So you have all these like pressure, electric, heat sensors that are in your car everywhere, but are really in all different type components. And I'm going to go back and collect reading material. I'm like a kid in a candy shop with all this technical data and recording, all the reading material. So you have a lot of sensors that go everywhere that feed back into the computer exactly what's going on, and then the computer could reconfigure itself based on, a form of artificial intelligence, where, so one thing, you have the robotic arms that could use some sort of intelligence to know what they're designed to do, and not just have like a pre-programmed physical function that they repeat over and over again, but an intelligence programmed into it, and a lot of this computer control software. So all this is on display here. We'll get to the materials. So right now I'm walking through more the automation, the different manufacturing components for making these devices, computer control systems, software, measurement systems. I'm not sure if there were just so many, like there were like 500 different companies here, and I spent like 6 hours reading through these booklets. But yeah, here's more measurement systems that this could be for testing. They have a whole conference here that also fills up the whole convention center here, automotive testing. That's just equipment that's designed to test various components of the automobile. But you have equipment that plugs into factory lines or batteries. That's pure purpose is to test it. So you got filters, different electrical components. You have like transducers, transistors, capacitors, all the various things. And it said some of these companies might make relay devices, and they have huge books of all the devices. So some of these companies might literally make millions and millions of various pieces, because you need a very specific fit. So they might be similar pieces. Here's just a gluing machine that automates gluing. You know, 3M, huge company, materials, but I watched that YouTube thing, The Company Man. You see these companies bigger than you think, where you might see 3M that makes all these type of tape, or they used to make floppy disk, but really they make all types of things, and even huge factory equipment. More magnets. I didn't have too much a chance to read through the magnets. And also you see China dominating the magnets business. And lithium, as I said, one of the reasons lithium is a very important component for batteries. I spoke to this man at length yesterday. Interesting, all types of test and measuring components. They gave me a huge book of various devices that they make, all useful for manufacture. But lithium is a huge component in your modern day battery, and I believe the largest lithium mines are in here you have chipboards, companies that will program chipboards to feed your drivetrain, stuff more directly related to automotive. So I said, like, technically the battery show, but if companies think they could sell their stuff and they rent a table here, even if the stuff is more automotive related. So this is in compliance. So yeah, I missed that yesterday. So in compliance, another resource for electrical engineers, another trade magazine. You get my father's a doctor, and if you like, and any type thing of expertise, you have all these periodicals that collect together the latest developments for the industry. So just amazing the amount of intellectual activity. Here you got stamping, all different types of medical metal devices that might go into these components. Hey, God bless. Siemens here. So I go to the Siemens conference every year. They just have a small table here, but certainly a lot of these factories will use Siemens control systems, and Siemens has hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of components that they make. I'm not sure if they, so just walking through here, give my voice a rest. People, here you got rare earth metals. So these are some of the material suppliers. Cooling, various things that might be useful to a lot of magnetic companies. Thermal interface materials. Heat is a very important component to batteries. As I said, you have your generic battery that might work. Lord, one of the sponsors of the show, all types of sensors or various equipment. See electric trucks. But heat and coolness is a very important thing, because on a factory floor, things might need to operate at very hot or very cool temperatures, and just a generic battery that almost always operates at room temperature. First, like climate, if you're in very hot climate or cool climate, versus factory conditions where you might be need stuff that could operate at extremely hot or cold temperatures. That so here is like an example of a fuller battery pack that might go in a car, where and really these battery packs that go in cars are in series, much smaller batteries that pack together into a battery pack. So we'll see more of that on the other side. But thermal devices are very important for these, where you might need different devices that operate at very hot or cool temperatures. And so it's another part of the process that's here. Here's electronic measurement devices, like a new Audi, and these kind of like boards. where you could feed in electrical signals, and then they could have precision-based recording of of testing that might be related to battery production. I guess e-mobility testing is probably a bicycle that generates energy. IMC. They come to a lot of these various shows related to automotive. It's got more sensors, magnets, chips, motherboards, moldings, plastic molding, metal stamping, consulting, engineering firms that will try to help you, various further inverters for people who know more about electrical engineering, like transducers, converters, inverters, inducers, resistors, capacitors. And he has said that if you needed components and something like that, there might be thousands and thousands of various components. Here's a prototype group, and you just see the huge amount of various devices that a parts maker might make. Maybe they even got like proving grounds. Just motors, engineering firms, design firms, consultants. Here's an example of a battery pack connected into a drivetrain shaft. Testing. So here you got lectures coming up. These are free lectures that aren't part of the paid conference. Quicker lectures. Also have quite a bit of expertise here. Must be someone about to start waiting around. So copper. Copper, very important component for electricity. Very conductive. So you have companies that just specialize in copper parts. So if you're looking at building up a company, you could have a very successful company that just does a small specialty, or as you build up, some of these companies will, basically just keep on producing anything they could do profitable, or they try to cover the whole needs, like supplier of a field. So they want to completely cover all of the needs that might be needed for a various field, and that could, need hundreds of thousands of parts. Here I had quite a few of cords, technical support, different things. I didn't have a chance to read through those booklets I got yesterday, more magnets, but companies that specialize in internet cords, connectivity devices, more magnetic companies out of China. I'm not such an expert in magnets, but for whatever reason, magnets are also being dominated by China. So they have various times of the day where different booths are giving explanations of their company. So here's the application software where their device would feed into a device, and then there was software that would do various scientific testing or data recording. Here's a cool device. I don't have time to go on one of these, but testing facilities for automobiles said that part of the revolution in manufacturing is the computer simulations that have allowed a much more advanced testing before things are built through computer simulations. You see a lot more Chinese companies, all different sort of things like tapes and films. Batteries are very complicated. As I said, usually you have conductive devices of two different materials that are separated by a film, and that will split the electrons off. And once the electrons are separated, that is what produces the electricity. So So a lot of times you have special films that separate the two different materials. So you have a lot of these companies that make the films, a bunch of German companies, Zimmer and Brüel and Kajer, electrical recording devices. Here you got a whole different type of cables. Could be copper cables, conductive cables, or fiber optics cable, data transferring cables. Very interesting. You got a Harley Davidson, I guess another data simulation testing device feeds into the automobile, various sensors. We'll put it out to the computer. Nice graphics on various. Here you're looking at moisture-proof material, different sensitivities that various materials, like I was mentioning, heat, thermal properties, but it could also be moisture properties. More cables. You see that cables are extremely important. So you have companies that make could be thousands and thousands of various cables that would meet very specific specifications depending on what your needs are. So you're getting a feel for these various parts makers and the huge amount of materials that they might make for your various needs. You just got a plastic maker, plastic components, related to manufacturer. You have a table here, said, you need plastic solutions, more battery testing solutions, special devices that test. I'm not sure for the quality control. If you look at these Chinese companies that were formed in the last 10, 15 years, usually they'll information displays, cameras. Usually they'll have, they'll have met ISO standards, international standards organizations. So they make the company, they pass ISO standards, and once they pass ISO standards, then they're able to sell their product internationally, because ISO is the main international standards organization. So here we're talking about hydraulics. It's just interesting, like air pressured manufacturing devices. So I say a lot of the conference type things are very specific to the type processes that go into manufacturers, like pneumatic, hydraulic devices. So a lot of these companies, I was saying, like that started in China like 10, 15 years ago. What they did was they get their ISO standards, and then they could sell their part internationally. And there's a whole bunch of ISO standards here, so you need these battery testing devices, and the various ISO standards usually require like 1 out of so many devices being tested. It could be 1 out of 10, it could be 1 out of 100,000, and but whatever it takes, that you have to. You're just lifts for manufacturing floor, cool stuff, that cool devices here on display. So you have any of these firms that make it need these testing devices, and in order to meet standards, besides for quality control, so some better companies will have better quality control than the standards require, or they'll just go the exact bare minimum standard. So here's a Chinese battery manufacturer that is traded on the NASDAQ, and I think they, really just a 15-year-old company. If you look in their book, the company forms, they start meeting some of their ISO standards, and then they really take off internationally as a supplier, being a big player within international manufacturer. So the testing devices are extremely important. It's required by standards organization, internal quality control, and as a part supplier, you need to produce quality parts without fail. like 1 out of 100,000 fail factor or something, whatever the requirement. But that bad part could cause injury. Here you just got shipping containers. These come to a lot of them, but various companies that's found it profitable to set up and sell their devices that are only loosely related to the topic at hand.
My turn. Exactly.
Lamination. Getting a little dizzy walking back and forth. Almost 40 minutes here, and I'm only about halfway done. Maybe a little more than halfway done. So I'll keep on talking through. I'll go try to walk the whole floor. Pretty interesting here. If it's only for I used to take pictures. I have on Facebook from previous years. Pictures. I'd go table to table and take pictures. And now I've switched to video. So I'm going to try to walk the whole floor, get a good feel. Hopefully this video will be useful to other people. And if not, at least it's useful to me for clearing up my thoughts. I'll be able to look back later and see some of the devices here. Hess Mechatronics, bonding. Use various methods, sealing, bonding. It's beyond my intellectual capacity, and probably anyone here's intellectual capacity, even the people that their whole life is battery research, to know all the various things. You got lithium storage racks, display of what you might see. So this company, Lithium Works with an E. What would look like an old lead acid battery, but it's lithium. Power cells. Here you got company tubing, various type of tubing. Use all different types of parts and supplies that are useful. You might have huge batteries here. You got Navitas systems and big batteries here. Cells. Leak testing, so very important. You can't have your devices leaking, so you have special components that test it. Might be a silicone, and it was another gluing device. Powdered metal solutions could be used in 3D printing or various additive manufacturers, as opposed to laser cutting or CNCing, where you have detractive manufacturing. We take a bigger piece and cut away what you don't want to get to what you do want. Additive manufacturing, which could be old school would have been molding, and now you might have things like 3D printing. So here's some smaller producers. Here you had the air processors, vacuum technology, things, chillers, various things that would be useful on the factory floor. Yeah, too bad I wasn't able to live stream. I just couldn't get the bandwidth. Fuses, saying the countless different type fuses. Another, battery supplier. See some of the nice things on display here. Molding, thermoplastics, material synthesis, material processing, different methods for material processing. We'll see the separators later, where you have like shakers or separators, plasma technology. Very fascinating. I wish I had more time to investigate it more. Metals, material suppliers, more materials development analysis. Um, so all different type pack components, converters. Charging technologies. Eco cab, I read that yesterday. Cables, more cables, Leona cables. Predel cables. So the floor is sometimes sectioned off where you have this people who do the same things in the same areas. Sometimes it's not, and you have different people all over the places. Or I said, a lot of these companies do a whole bunch of things, and usually there's some sort of logic to companies doing various things, but sometimes it's harder to determine. Just the companies start doing one thing, and will usually move into a similar field, expand into a field that's very similar. However, sometimes it's more variant, but so usually the companies are in similar areas in these, so they're right next to their competition, and it's also like a conference where it's best practices and semi-friendly between engineers, and people have patents and S-Bahn robots, various robotics makers, more thermal management solutions. So you got some pretty cool plasma technologies, cool stuff on display. Yeah, I'm already at it more from 45 minutes. If this video is well received, maybe I'll come back tomorrow and try to do interviews and talk to people. But it's a little bit overwhelming, and I might just walk through, and all you'll get is my basic explanation as a non-expert in the field, just someone with a basic background in science, talking about trends. But if there's interest in this video is well received, maybe I'll try to come back tomorrow. And so here you got lead, good old-fashioned lead acid batteries. Looks like also made out of China. But because of the recycling environmental concerns, lead acid batteries are on the decline. Here you have actually powders, nickel, graphite, cobalt, iron phosphate, various forms. So you could see what these pellets that factory might order would look like. It almost looks like candy, but it's not. These are the materials that would go into a battery. You got more materials companies, composites of various materials, cutting devices, bonding material, films. Maybe if I had more time, I'd do like a public study session on how batteries are made, but I'm not really an expert, and there's probably better material, or even for my own basis. But maybe at some point, Ramble, big robotics maker, another firm, Chinese company that makes all types of equipment that would possibly be able to make your whole battery line. Here you see a display of various type batteries that might go from like a phone to a small device, although automotive is the most important one here. But people who know batteries, there's thousands of various batteries of different sizes and strengths for devices, from like pacemakers, biological. There you see the heat sensor. It's camera devices, so that's me holding my camera there with this heat sensor camera. So yeah, as I was talking about artificial intelligence, where you could have these various sensors that would be useful for inspections or even programmed directly into the computer and fed into the computer for the control systems. Here you see Hint Technologies, founded in 2006, a leading lithium battery manufacturing equipment supplier in China, and is that a lot of these Chinese companies have really only started in the last 10, 15 years and now completely dominate the business. And anyone who used to go to these conferences, the demographics has changed from being mostly German, European to possibly more Asian than German. More materials. Here you got copper film, copper foil. And here you got, this might look like what would exist in a car on display. Cooling systems. Obviously, batteries produce a significant amount of heat, and automobiles, so you need cooling, very important. I'm walking around. Some of these, bigger companies rent bigger places. They even have their own private seating area, trying to make sales. So some people come to the conference just to learn the latest technology, but most of these people also have sales staff here. And, if you're a purchaser, so that guy walking around, he had a title buyer. So, people come to the floor because these, this supply chain is international. So to have one show where you could meet the various suppliers from all over the world, telesonic, ultrasonic devices, they come to a lot of these shows. Okay, so I'm about 2/3 through, almost an hour here. Got mixers, various materials. You'll see a lot of these mixer companies coming up, more copper foil, important for batteries, the different foils or films that are used as separators in the battery. Here you got, battery packs. I think we're going to get in the area more you actually see the actual battery company, fiber lasers. Various laser companies. Lasers are very important in manufacturing processes these days, from like cutting to some like cooler displays. Okay. So CFriend, read through their booklet yesterday. Organization based on friendship. A lot of various suppliers here. As so you can see the huge amount of people from China here. Despite the tariffs, it's extremely unlikely that the U.S. will be able to compete in battery manufacture. Some other things, it's possible, like steel or coal or various production that's went to China. Things like tariffs might affect that, but like I was discussing with Yuan on my chess stream yesterday, it's extremely unlikely that the U.S. is going to be able to compete in battery manufacture. And as I said, like within the last decade or so, China has basically completely taken over battery production, And there was one company in Michigan that's recently started producing lead acid batteries. I'm not sure how well they're doing. And you just see the dominance for various reasons why almost all batteries these days are coming out of China. And South Korea also is becoming more and more represented at these conferences, testing computer software. ChemSoil multi-physics platform. God bless.
Hey.
I've been to your training many times.
Yeah.
I get your emails. Awesome. Yeah, ChemSoil multi-physics. That man. I'm not sure if he's local or not, but yeah, I mean that's awesome. Simulated software to test physics ideas like differential equations, where you could design various parts and then test the physical properties through the multi-physics platform, running a series of differential equations to test the properties. And I said that's vastly changed the nature of manufacture, is this computer simulation. So you don't always have to, there's huge factors like 3D printing and metal filament printing, but to the extent you don't always have to make the prototype to test it, you could use these multi-physics platforms and test your devices before you even make it, or use the computer multi-physics platforms to help determine what's the most efficient form to use before you even build it. So ChemSoil, there's a few competitors. I think ChemSoil's out of Switzerland. I've been trained on their software, and they're actually very expensive, like $5,000, $10,000, and they're broken down to various components like chemical, electronic, which cost like $10,000. So if you wanted the complete multi-physics platform, it could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So here's an example car, various sensors that would go into the car. A lot of our cars do have the computer in a car. I was saying that your average car these days has over 1 million lines of code. There's more code in a typical car than maybe even Facebook or the spacecraft has. As I said, that all the various sensors that feed into your car. So ChemSoil also, like the testing devices, depending on what level you want to test it, requires a huge amount of data processing. So you actually send it to an international computer processing facility and will pay them. So even on a very powerful computer in a manufacturing facility, to actually test the multi-physics would require more processing than imaginable. It could take weeks to fully test it. So you might take the data file, send it to these facilities that have mainframe high processing speed computers, and pay them to process them for you, and then get the results back. So it's very interesting if you were designing, and even a larger process like a full automobile is basically beyond computer capacity to can you reduce something? Like I talked with JF in one of my debates about reducing the ultimate physics, ultimate science is even with like the Gödel's incompleteness theorem and the problem with arithmetic, but saying that the best science is things that are reducible to making predictions, and the most accurate predictions are mathematical equations, and anything scientific will be reduced to a series of differential equations. And so larger processes, you have to make estimates. You can't completely reduce it to a series of differential equations. You have to make estimates on So even a small thing like a single operation of a battery, different materials operating in a different form, might take huge amounts of processing times. So something like COMSOL multiphysics is completely changing the nature of manufacture. See all these various supplies, probably about 3/4 through. Still walking through, trying to see various robotics. I don't even know what this stuff does. I don't have enough time to. I got so heavy yesterday. I was carrying like well over 50 pounds of reading material around yesterday. It was just too heavy for me to keep on collecting reading material, so I wasn't even able to keep on picking up the data to say what this stuff does. Testing chambers, automotive testing expo is coming here, I think in November. So I've walked like probably 2 or 3 miles now. I'm at it an hour, just walking up and down aisle by aisle of the floor. I probably walked over 3 miles now. Yesterday I did that, slowly getting more and more books, like carrying 50 pounds by the end, where I couldn't even lift my arms. My shoulders and arms were just sore from carrying all this reading material. But here's about where I stopped yesterday collecting reading material, because I couldn't carry anymore. So when I'm done walking through here, I'm going to go back around and collect some more reading material.
Now, did you ever look into it?
Scooter batteries.
I just need to get it, see if it's going to work out.
Tried to remember what booklets I got yesterday, so I will pick up and don't get duplicates. Some of these are expensive, might even cost like $10, $20 to print these materials. As I said, some of these like multi-billion-dollar companies, and the people on the floor are relatively like interns or sales or just manning a booth. So you just take the booklets, and the companies are trying to promote themselves. It's tough to advertise. Like you're not gonna, like these periodicals, they might advertise in these periodicals, or they come to the show, sponsor the show, or give away free reading material at these shows in order to promote their company. So usually someplace people are like, don't like giving are you going to buy something? They don't, because it's not necessary. Here's the University of Michigan battery lab, and they actually have the directors. I've toured that with Engineering Society of Detroit. I have on my Facebook pictures. Research testing facility for batteries, more generic batteries than the bigger. They test your generic like AA battery style, then laser devices, then automotive batteries. But yeah, University of Michigan has tens of millions of dollar facility. Maybe on Facebook one time I'll review the pictures, or maybe I'll tour it again. If I had more time, I'd like to get if I could develop an audience, because it's hard to make a livelihood in these fields, because you really got to sell something, or you got to work as like work your way into one of these firms, get a job with one of these firms, work your way up, and you end up doing something very tedious as opposed to generic scientific research. So like I'm more civil engineering, worked in more generic construction, even financial type things, and study this more a pure intellectual curiosity, technology enthusiast, technology geek. But if I could build a niche in like technology reporting, even make a livelihood at it, or being promoting where I understand this stuff well enough, where I'm starting to help connect people for like consulting for building factories, for international supply chains and various things like that. As my research becomes more perfected, then maybe I would be able to start doing tours of these various facilities, and would continue in my live streaming career of touring facilities, interviews. So right now, hey, God bless. Right now, it's basically me just rambling, pontificating, some explanations, and even my knowledge isn't hardly adequate to do more than basics. But I will continue the floor. I'm getting a little hungry. I'm gonna go back around, gather up some more reading material. Before the conference was so big, and the first year I went and took pictures at all the various tables. I haven't shaken any hands because I'm holding the camera. But you also somehow shake hundreds of hands. Yesterday I shook hundreds of hands. Here is a pretty cool display with the Energizer Bunny. Just automation, modular components, like I was saying, reconfigurable manufacturing processes, as opposed to like the Henry Ford old school production line, where it was configured in one way to make one. You have reconfigurable modular devices, where the same production line could make many different components, and it could even be completely automated by the computer, where you just feed in the orders even, and that would directly feed into the computer what the customer wants, and the production line could automatically reconfigure itself. So that's pretty high tech, your average one. So here's a big example of a big battery. This might even go in like a bus or something, an electric bus. There might be multiple ones of these. More testing quick. Macor is a huge company there. You see like holographic projection advice. You see the Macor label. Holographic projection is cool technology. I predict that getting bigger. Now we get some actual more battery makers. So pretty cool. Various components. I'm almost done. Only 2 more aisles. So running out of things to say, but I'm gonna continue and finish the whole walking floor. People who are watching this, I hope this is beneficial. People, generic science education, and display. Props to Detroit, like a new conference in Detroit. So even though there's a lot of local firms here in Detroit related to automotive, hopefully Detroit will maintain its center as still Detroit is largely the center of the automotive industry in the world. So you might have places like Tokyo or Shenzhen or Seoul, South Korea, or Stuttgart, Germany, but Detroit is probably still the most centralized place. Like Tesla out in California. A lot of these things are moving out. Battery production, testing of electric vehicles, but Detroit is still probably the biggest central hub. Here you get your chambers, pretty cool scientific chambers, cool devices. I think I wasn't so friendly yesterday, but whatever, they're still cool devices. But Detroit is still probably the most central hub for manufacture. So as I said, this show travels around the world: China, Germany, Korea, maybe Japan. Here you get some more of the solar components. Batteries very connected to solar power, because solar power needs to be stored. And like here in Michigan, you might feed the solar energy back into the grid, but generally that's only because of Michigan law and lobbying of Detroit Edison, that decided that it's not in their economic interest to allow people to store energy off grid. But generally, solar power would be stored through batteries. Just if it was a place that had a lot of sun, at night you don't have sun, so you could store it, or even the summer, various times where you have large amounts of sun, and then the batteries could store it over time. So that's another huge field related to batteries, is the storage of solar energy, maybe even wind energy. But there you would need wind energy. You would need huge. Amounts to store the type of energy made. But you see some of the size of these huge batteries that might be able to store that. But as I said, Detroit is still probably the most central hub of the automotive industry in the world, even though President Trump spoke from this room. He might come back to this room. Mr. Fisher, pretty Republican, very strong gun supporter. President Trump, the Michigan Republican Party, has a lot of stuff here in this room. As President Trump used to be, you couldn't drink the water in Mexico, and cars were made in Michigan and made in Detroit, and now cars are made in Mexico and you can't drink the water in Detroit, which is unfortunate, but a little bit of an exaggeration, because in reality, Detroit is still the most central hub of automotive manufacture, hence why all of these companies from all over the world are still coming here to Detroit to sell their devices, and even just to talk to each other. So even if they're not selling their devices to companies here in Detroit, they're really coming to have a conference, meet with each other, exchange trade secrets, best practices, so on and so on, workshops. And Detroit makes sense. Society of Automotive Manufacturers, SAE, Automotive Engineers, they had a table here at this conference, is still has annual conference here in Detroit. The Siemens North America conference is here in Detroit. So Detroit is at least holding its head over water and staying relevant, even though there are a few new factories being built and stuff like that. But Detroit is, and it's not Charged magazine, great magazine. They give me a free subscription. I've been reading these monthly magazine, great stuff. But Detroit is staying relevant, staying, just barely the center of manufacturing processes. But it's been delocalized, so it's not really Detroit. We're in the suburbs right now, and you can see the racial, ethnic component here, where suburban, kind of Republican, central area of Metro Detroit here in Novi. So I think I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to go back to about where I stopped picking up the booklets yesterday, and pick up some more booklets, and hope this video is useful to people. If it's well received and I have time, I might try to come back tomorrow and speak to people, interviews, have more in-depth filming of actual devices, and maybe explanations of the people, what there is, and see how much time I have to read more of the reading material, or I might not come back tomorrow. It was a great show. I'm glad for Detroit, success. Mr. Fisher, props, local Jewish billionaire who purchased this convention center, has expanded it, filling it up. God bless you, Mr. Fisher. Thank you. And you will see, I predict President Trump speaks from this room. That you'll see President Trump come to this very room, probably campaigning in the next year, and maybe I'll be here for that. I don't know. We'll see. It's very interesting. I'll come here for the Automotive Testing Expo in a few months, and try to do another stream. If I have the bandwidth, I'll live stream it. See a lot of Germans here. Still, Germans still very prominent in manufacture You hear a lot of people from Germany, a lot of blue-eyed people, a lot of people speaking German. So that's pretty cool also. So I'm going to sign off and gather some more reading material. And God bless everyone. Take care.